All right, into SQLcl itself, and let's look to see what SQLcl looks like. So I did bump up my font quite a bit, and I'm cheating. I am running that version that doesn't technically exist yet. So this is the version that's due out in a couple of weeks, or God forbid, first part of 2022. And if I run help, whole slew of commands here. But the one that we're really interested in is this one called data pump. Now, we are lazy. So the first thing that we did is we give you a nice short code for that. So you can just say DP for data pump, and you can say help. And you can even say examples if you want. And it just prints back a list of example scenarios. Now, if I just say DP help, it prints everything, and there's a lot of stuff to see here. Let me make my screen wider. Making the font bigger for folks on the Zoom to see means I can't fit quite as much on the screen. But when I said that we tried to make this as simple as possible, I really did mean that. So the defaults, it automatically will pump out the schema for your session. So if I log in as HR and say data pump export, it's going to export the HR schema. It's automatically going to write to the data pump directory defined in the database. It's automatically going to have a job name based on my schema, and then a sequence number. And we're using these sequence numbers to prevent us from clobbering existing files from jobs, logs, dump exports that you may have previously ran. You can, if you want, override all of this. So you can say, this is what I want to export. This is where I want to write to. This is what I want the jobs to be called. This is what I want the dump files to be called. This is what I want the log files to be called. But in the realm of the simple, 2 words, one of these isn't even really a word, DP export, and then it just immediately kicks off and runs. And we're querying what they call the master table and data pump to see what's going on as it goes. And then when it's done, we're like, okay, well, first of all, up top, we tell you where we're writing to, what the log file's called. And then at the end, we tell you, okay, here's where the dump file set was written to in the list of files. And we end with the current status, or the finishing status, and the end time. So we show you when it started and when it stopped. Like I said, lots and lots of flags. And if you want to deviate, it's as simple as just adding those flags to the command. So I can say data pump export schemas flag, and then follow that with a list of comma delimited schemas. Obviously, to use these things, you're only going to be able to export the things that you have privileges on. So we're not cheating and allowing you to bypass the rules in the database. The only cheat we've done is just make the data pump SQL API more friendly to end users. So lots of options in the data pump API. And for this V1, we did not expose every single one of the SQL API for data pump as parameters on the command. We wanted to get this out this year and not 5 years from now, because it's going to take a while to expose all of those. So we took what we thought would be the most common ones out of the box. So another thing we've done on the help is we've added a parameter called syntax. So if you say DP help syntax, it gives a nice condensed view of what to do with the commands. And it basically takes out all of the English sentences and takes out all of the examples. And it's just a flat list of the parameters and arguments and descriptions of those. Another thing that we've done is we tried to use meaningful words to describe the flags or the arguments. And these don't match up exactly to how they're listed. And for example, the data pump specific command line or the SQL API, In some cases, we made some semantic changes to something that we thought made a little bit more sense for someone who would be a SQLcl user. But we are listing those in the help along with the original names. So it's completely obvious what these things will be touching if you use them. We've also have short codes in here. So I don't actually have to type out -directory. I can literally just type out -d, which I will use all the time once my brain memorizes all of these things. So I've shown you this already, but just as a reminder, there's some common scenarios that we figured people would be using. And one of those was, hey, help me get data out and then put it back in somewhere else. And then several scenarios in here where you might want to update this, uptake your dump files to an instance running in the Oracle Cloud. And so we've got examples in there that take advantage of our native Oracle Cloud or OCI SDK support. So for example, you can set an object stored bucket as your default, we call it cloud storage space. And you can immediately copy files up to those or pull them down or rename them or even peek inside the file to see what's what. So if your log files were in S3, you could use a cspeek command to like read the first 100 lines of a log file if you wanted. One of our caveats, one of the rules that I have, and maybe it's not my rule, but I've been saying this for so long, it feels like it's my rule. I always want a way to be able to have the tool show me what it's going to do before it actually does it. So in that parameters list, if you had eagle eyes, you would have noticed there was like a debug section in there, and there's a flag called noexec, or shortened to NE. And what that does is it takes everything that you've told us to do, builds up the PL SQL block that we're going to run on your behalf, and it prints it to the screen. And then that's all it does. So in the day, you could do nothing but use this feature to build for you these PL SQL scripts that you then go run and wherever you want that supports the anonymous block in. Or you can use it as, I'm not sure I completely understand what I'm doing, or I'm not sure I completely trust SQLcl to do what I wanted to do. So you can use this as sort of like a prove it or test. You know, is this actually getting me what I want? And maybe, you know, one of the parameters we haven't implemented yet, and you know how to use it. Well, you can use this to build up your 400 plus lines of PL SQL to kick off your jobs, and you can insert your own little 10 lines wherever you want and be at perfection. So -NE says noexec. If we look up here, you can see I've used some of the other parameters. So I've said for schemas, I only want these schemas. For the output file, I want my dump to be called this. The log file is going to be called this. The job name is going to be called this. And you would see that represented down here in both the PL SQL block, and if this were actually going to run, you would see that in the output from the command that comes back. If I were to do an export exactly like the one I just showed, and then I toggled over to an instance of SQL Dev Web running, I could watch it run, and I could immediately open up the log file in my browser if I wanted to do that. So if someone else in your org doesn't have access to your command prompt to see the output from the command, they could kick over into the web page and see it. Just to show you folks this is real. Show you what it looks like. And then once this is done, I'm going to kick it over to Brian, and he's going to do a little bit more show and tell. So another thing that we've done, because I've seen this happen over and over again, huge bummer, you go to do an import, and you find out that the time zone version is incompatible. So when we do an export, we print in the log the version of the time zone file in the database. And if you're not familiar with that, every 2 days, some government somewhere, there's a riot because people don't like daylight savings time, or there's some disagreement over if, this city should be in this time zone or this other time zone. They're inventing new time zones, and there's time zones on the half hour. Anyway, the database team has to update the code in the database to represent all of these time zones. When you use a temporal timestamp with time zone data type, we know what the hell you're talking about. If these versions aren't compatible, like if you have a version in the target database that is lower than the version you're coming from, data pump will just fail to run completely. And you have to go update that time zone file. So we've just included that in the log. So while that's running, I do have data pump going over here. Of course, now it's going to be slow once I ask it to do its job. Okay, maybe I'm not going to show that. And for time's sake, you can take my word that this is working, and this is what it would look like in the screen, and this is what the log would look like when it's done. And I'm going to hand it over to Brian.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
So what we're going to show real quick, it shouldn't take very long, is just how easy it is to run this command. And it's not supposed to be a complicated demo, but it is something that, that would show that as a developer, as someone who is, working locally in a database or working in the particular database, and you wanted to move some stuff from where you are to, say, a cloud or an Oracle cloud or any cloud or another database, it's really, really simple to do. So here we are. Here's our command prompt. We're just going to start SQLcl here. We're going to run this, and we'll use the secret 21.4 version. And then we're going to connect to, let's say this is an on-premise database here. I'm just going to use password. And now we are logged into the database. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to set our OCI profile. This is just going to say, hey, if you want to use the cloud stuff. Creating an OCI profile is very easy to do. Once you're in OCI, you just go to your user page and you set a key, and then it spits out this thing that you copy and paste and put into a folder, and it in essence tells SQLcl where you are, what's going on. And you can use it for OCI CLI if you have it locally, Terraform, all sorts of good stuff. But once this is set, you're able to use our CS commands in SQLcl. And what we're going to do here is we're going to set our container. So we just want to say that use this container or bucket in OCI. And then we're just going to start data pumping out this particular schema. This schema is, it's small. It has a table in it with some data. It's got a procedure, and it's got an index and maybe a few other things, but it's relatively simple. But again, it's more about the commands. Again, so this is the first command I'm really actually running to work with the database. So we'll just do a data pump export, and that's going to start running data pump. Now, while this is running real quick, what we can do is we can jump over to OCI here. And what's going to happen is it's going to put it into my bucket. So if I go over here to my buckets, and eventually we'll see this just show up in our data pump demo bucket. And this will be here as it retrieves the object. So it's still running to grabbing the stuff, but it will eventually show up in that location. So again, quick summary, what we did is we logged into a local database. We set our OCI profile. We told SQLcl what bucket we want to use, what bucket we have access to in OCI that we want to put this data pump file, and then we just ran data pump with the cloud copy flag. And that's going to say, hey, data pump through SQLcl. Once you're done doing this, I want you to take this file and put it into the bucket we have in the cloud. So that should be done in a second. And once we refresh this, I see that it's just about done. And there it is. So there's our data pump file. So if I pass back real quick over to our command line, we'll see that it, just as Jeff did it, it spit out all this stuff. Now what we're going to do is we're going to, from the same command line, we're going to set our cloud config. So we're going to be using an autonomous database. So by setting the cloud config, that's going to say, hey, use this wallet with the keys in it. And then we're going to log into this user over in an autonomous database. And give the password. And what we're going to do, again, a single command, we're going to say, take this file, the data pump import, cloud copy. So it's going to take that file and it's going to copy it to the local autonomous directory. And then it's going to import that in. And it's going to change. My local database had users as a table space, and we're going to take that table space, we're going to make it data. Just a very simple remap process. And we're going to run this. So this is going to run and it's going to start importing. So if I pass this back over to OCI, we can actually go look at the autonomous database here. And so here is our database. And this is an always free database. So everything we're seeing here is an always free service. And what we can do is we can actually log into our database actions and go to see if there's anything running. So if I go to this data pump over here, we'll see that nothing is running here. It should be running, but it's not. We'll give it a second here. And then over here, we'll find that over in our SQL commands, we're going to actually see the table show up here as it imports that process. Those particular pieces of the data pump into this when this is done. So again, look at this as a simplicity. We basically ran two commands, and I'll just jump back over to here to the terminal. We ran two commands. We took it, that data pump, and we put it into the cloud, and then we turned around and we put it into we took it from a local database and we turned around and we put it into the cloud. Very, very easy process, a very simple process that anyone can do. Again, you have to obviously have the access rights to do this, make sure that user has it. But we see that it's a very, very simple process. Just pull this out, put it into a cloud container. Once it's there, grab it and put it into your database. Now, as Jeff said earlier, this, especially with SQLcl, a lot of this stuff can be scripted. So you can have this installed, say, on a Docker or installed in a CI/CD process where it's going to wake up and run this and maybe create an environment or do some tests or do a whole bunch of things, depending on what you want to do. But we see that it's just a very, very easy process to just run this data pump command from SQLcl and do what you want to do. This will eventually go, it's always free, so it's using a fraction of a CPU, so it takes a second. But with that, I will pass it back to Jeff to show a couple more things real quick.
So what we have now is if you're logged in your OCI console as the administrator owner of a resource, in this case, my database, there's a database actions link here that I can click. And this will automatically log me in as the admin user in my database in SQL Developer Web. It doesn't prompt me for the username and password, which is very nice. I created a user called Jeff. So my Jeff database user has published a dashboard. It's composed of one or more charts, and these charts are tied to SQL queries. And I can see what's behind the SQL queries if I just toggle to a grid. So this is the raw data, however many 100 rows. 1,000 rows that we're using to paint these pictures, basically. So you can create a single chart and share that if you want. These charts are backed by REST APIs, so you could use those REST APIs in your own apps to pull down this data and even visualize it if you'd like. I can organize the charts on screen any way that I want. So I could make this one like a 4x4 quadrant, or have this thing stretch all the way across, or I could have one chart take up the entire screen if I want. You've got a whole slew of chart options to go with. This is a 3D pie chart. If you don't like the 3D, you don't have to use the 3D. As you mouse over the points, you can see the values. This is responsive. So this will work well on a mobile device. Let's say you're on a response team and you're having performance issues that people are reporting. You can easily create a chart and pull this up on your iPad or your phone and see what's what in your session. These are queries that aren't being fed new data on a regular basis, so there's no real need to do refreshes here, but I have another series of reports that pulls performance data out of the data dictionary, in which case you would use the refresh section. So this is a brand new feature in ORDS and SQL Developer Web. It's available in Oracle Cloud for Autonomous, but it's also available anywhere that you're running. It's available anywhere that you're running ORDS. You just need 21.3 for the dashboards, and you need 21.2 for just the pure charts.